Hello, my name is Ewan, and today I'll be showing you how to create and submit your own shapes from Minecraft title generator. There will be a text version of this in the README on the GitHub repository. So at the moment, there's guides for textures, tile levels, and fonts. I will be adding the shapes one to this, so this will be available after this video is out. So before we get started, there will be a couple things that we need. So obviously, we need Blockbench. I've already installed that, but we also need Node.js. That's not how you spell it, but anyway. Node.js, so you will need Node installed. This is JavaScript, so just download it here and go through the installer. I already have that installed as well. And the last thing is Git. I will install that as we get to it. So to get started, we need a GitHub account. So if you just go to github.com and then create an account. And then after that, if you go to the Minecraft title generator GitHub repository, it will be linked in the description. You should find this page here. So this is the page where all of the current fonts, shapes, textures, this is where they all are. So the first thing we need to do is create a fork of this. There's this button up here called fork. Let's click on that. We can leave all this default and just click create fork. It'll just take a second. So we go. Now we have our own version of the GitHub repository. So you see it says R1 here with our profile picture, and then if we click on this one, it takes us to the main one. I'm on an alternate account at the moment, which is the blue one, to show what it would be like for you rather than for me, because I own it. So after we forked it, we now need to download it to our computer. So you see this green code button. If we click this, we can click Open with GitHub Desktop. I do not have GitHub Desktop installed, so I will download it now, which is what you'll most likely need to do. If you already have it installed, then you just need to clone the repository into it through there. So let's download it and just go through its installer quickly. It'll ask us to sign in. You can just click that. It should just open your browser and then you enter your username and password. And then after signing in, it'll just ask you to select the user, continue, and then authorize the desktop app. You then should see this. You can just leave it as the default values, just click finish, and then we'll get to the let's get started screen. You should already see the forked repository here. So we can just click on that and click clone. You could also click clone here and then enter the link for it manually. So I'm just going to click clone this button, and now we need to select a folder. So I'm just going to put this in my downloads folder just because it's quick to get to. But if you're planning to make multiple things, you'd want to put it somewhere easy to remember that you will keep around. So let's click clone. It'll take a second. We don't need this anymore. We can close that. And then just click continue. And there we go. If we click on this here, we can right click it and click show in Explorer, and then it will open the files. So these files are going to match the exact ones that we saw in the GitHub repository. So the first thing we need to do after we've cloned the files is go into the shapes folder. In the shapes folder, you will see a list of all of the shapes that are currently in the title generator. So we need to make a new folder, and we're going to give this the ID of the shape that we're going to make. I'm going to make a Minecraft heart. So let's just call this heart. Open that. I'm currently using a different profile on my PC to show you what it would be like using the programs for the first time. But this bit's going to be easier for me if I'm on my normal user. So I'm just going to switch to that quickly. So now that I'm back on my normal Windows profile, I have access to all my regular programs like Photoshop and stuff. That should make me making the texture so much easier. So now that I have the heart folder, I'm going to make a textures folder. This textures folder is where we're going to put the textures for our shape. We can't really make the model until we have a basic texture ready, so I'm going to do the texture first. So let's open this textures folder, and I need a heart texture now. I'm going to use the heart from Minecraft. So this one here. So I'm going to open this in Photoshop. You could also use GIMP or Paint.net or even Blockbench. Blockbench has an image editor mode. You could use any of those to make your texture. It's up to you, whatever you prefer. So here's the heart texture. Currently though, this is too small. I'm going to get the Minecraft 10 font texture. So let me go to fonts, Minecraft 10 textures, and find the flat texture. There we go. Let's edit that in Photoshop as well. Let's set the mode to RGB color. I'm going to use this as a reference for how big the heart should be. So as you can see here, if I compare this current heart to the characters, it's really small. So I'm going to make it 4 times larger. So let me set the width to 400%. And I need it so it doesn't go blurry. Let's set that to nearest instead. 400%. And of course, Photoshop has distorted it, so I now need to fix that. So there is my hard texture. You see now it's a good size because it matches the width of the characters. So this hard texture, I'm going to move it to the top left, and it can't be at the top because I need space above it for the top face. So like you see this A character here, the creeper face A, it has the front, the top, and the bottom. I need the same for my shape. But instead of putting it here, I'm going to make the heart slightly thinner than a normal character because it's shorter. So I'm going to move it to the top, and then I'm going to move it 16 pixels down so that it's got 16 pixels at the top above it. And then I'm going to measure 16 pixels below. That goes to there. So then this here is going to be how big my texture is. Let's crop that, crop, delete the font beneath it. Here is my texture. If I save this quickly, so I'm going to save this in the shapes, hard folder, textures folder. I'm going to call this red because it's the red heart. Now I need to make a top and bottom texture. I'm going to do that just really simply by just stretching these out. So it's on the top. And then stretch out the bottom one, so it's on the bottom. But I need to change the color as well, so they're not the same as the front. So let me select the top 16 pixels, that's the top face. Let's select this color, and why not use that as the top? And then select the bottom 16 pixels. Select this color again, let's go a bit darker. About there you go, let's save that. So now I can open Blockbench and actually start making the model. So the models for Minecraft title generator are made using the Java block item format. So I'm going to go in here, create a new model, and confirm that. We need to add our texture, so let's get the folder up, back, there it is, and we can drag our texture in, import texture. I don't think I saved it. Did I save it? Oh, I overwrote the, oops, I overwrote this one. I need to not do that. I'll fix that other texture later. But let's replace that on properly. Save, yes. And let's close that so I don't do that a second time. And let's edit that. There we go. Now it's not going to overwrite the other texture. So in Blockbench, we have our texture imported. Let's just refresh it. And we can start modeling. So let me add our cube with the Add Cube button. And we can apply our texture to the cube by right-clicking it, go in Texture and red.png. You'll see the texture has appeared on the left, but our cube still looks transparent. And that is because if I select the faces, you see the face up here does not match. And also we cannot actually see our whole texture. That is because up here it says it thinks it's 16 by 16, but our actual texture, if you look down here, is 28 by 60. It thinks it's an animated texture currently. So let's go in and change this to match. So it's 28 by 60. There we go, now we can see the whole thing. So we need to make our cube be the right size now. So let's use the resize tool and we can drag it across. That's 14 pixels wide. You can see here that as I resize it, it's actually changing the UV automatically. That is because the UV size here, if you're on the cube, you can toggle more options. It's set to the pin mode, auto UV on. So if it's on pin mode, when you resize it, it should automatically resize in here. But if it isn't resizing, you could click the auto UV button and that'll bring it up to the size. So for the north face, we want it to be on the front. Let's drag it down. And now let's just resize it. You see, because I've resized it manually now, it's not doing it. So let's put it back on pin mode. There we go. We can drag it out to be the right size. The front is going to be the same as the back. So let's copy that, paste that on the back. And we need to flip it because currently you see the white dot is on the wrong side on the back. So let's flip it with the UV mirror X, and now it's on the right side. We now need to make it the right thickness. We know it's 16 because that's how big I made the top. So let's drag it until this is 16. You could also type in 16 up here. And the final thing we need is to just center it. So that's the middle there. We can click the center pivot button just to put the pivot in the middle. It looks nicer. There we go. There's the front and back. For the sides, we don't need side textures. So we can texture transparent those. The top texture, we need to bring that up to the right size. And the bottom texture, we need to bring that down to the bottom and up to the right size. So this is the basic shape done. We only have a single cube. It's just the basic shape. We have the front, back, top, and bottom. There's one thing I need to check though, and that is that the top and bottom faces are on the right way round. Because they're symmetrical, we cannot tell currently. So I'm just going to get a line and just draw it here. And there we go. We see the line is connected here, but in the texture, the front face is not connected to the top face. So I need to mirror this in both axes in this case. So let's flip, and now it should line up correctly. There we go. That goes for the bottom as well, most likely. If I draw this here, you see it doesn't line up. So let's go back to edit mode, select the bottom, flip, flip, and now it lines up properly. There we go. So on this model, I don't want it where only the top and bottom have the bottom face. I also want a top face on this pixel here, and on these pixels on the bottom, and maybe this middle one as well. So let's do that quickly. In the texture though, I don't have space to add those, because if I put them here, if I put them in those 3 spots for the top one, for example, so if I start texturing there, you'll see it actually shows up in the wrong spot on the model because we've got a big cube. So we now need to expand our texture. Before we do that, I'm going to export our model. So File, Export, Export, and I need to save this to the heart folder. So let's copy that up there. This just needs to be saved as model.json. If I go back to the texture, I already have it open here. I need to now expand this. Let's make it a bit wider. And I now need to add in the new top and bottom textures. So this is 4 pixels wide. So I'm just going to copy this 4 pixels onto a new layer, Control-C-V. And that is going to go there, but in its own space over here later. But I'm going to do it here first so I can line up correctly. Let's do another one here. And the last one here. Let's merge those 3 together. And I can drag it across over here. I'm going to move it across 2 pixels so that it is not touching this one, so it's clear that it's separate. So that is our new top done. Now it's time for the bottom. We'll do the bottom one in the same way. Copy paste this, move this all the way to the left so it lines up with this bit up here, because that's where it's going to be. This one needs to be here. Merge those. You can use Control-E in Photoshop to merge them, and then drag it over. It needs to be 2 pixel gap, bring it down. And now I need to do the same again. This one is going to be lined up with this one, and then let's bring this one over to here. Put those together, those 2, and we can bring it over again. Pixel gap to show it separate. I don't have enough space, I need to make it slightly wider still for the last one, which is going to be this one here, and this one here. Let's merge those together and bring it over. 2 pixel gap, merge, and there we go. I can save that, minimize that, open the model in Blockbench, I already have it open, and now I can refresh the texture. But now you'll see it is completely distorted. I have a thing that will fix this for us. So if we look in the model, we'll see it's distorted because the UV is still on the old texture, but we've updated the texture. So let me close the model. I have a thing that fixes this for us. If I go to the Minecraft Text Generator folder, go to the scripts folder, and then there is a shape size fix.bat file. This uses Node, so this is what we need Node for. There is also the compile.bat, that is for compiling the shape, but we'll get onto that later when we finish making the shape. If you're on a Mac or a Linux computer, this bat file won't work. That's only for Windows. You'll just need to run this JavaScript file here manually. So on Windows, I can double click this bat file and it will ask me to enter the shape ID. So I'm going to write heart, as that is our shape ID. And now it wants the new UV width. That is the new width of our texture. So the width of our texture is 99. That is a problem. The shape must be an even width and height. So I'm going to crop off the unnecessary space and save that. There we go. It's now 94. So 94, and the height is 60. So height 60. Enter. It says the UVs have been updated and saved to modelfix.json. So let me close that. I'm going to go back to the heart folder, shapes heart, and now we have model fixed. Let's open this in Blockbench. You'll see in here it says that red.png was not found. We can just drag that in. Textures red.png. Let's drag that in. Change file, and there we go. There's our shape. And you see it's working properly. So now it's time to add the new top and bottom textures. I'm going to do this by just duplicating this cube with Control-D. You could also make a new one and assign the texture to it again. For the top face, it's just going to be flat. Actually, no, it's not going to be flat. It's going to be, we can use it for the top and bottom. So if I bring this up to here and I resize this down, this can be used as the top of these 3 pixels and the bottom of these 2 pixels. So on the north and south face of this cube, if I drag this out so you can see it, we don't actually need the front and back texture because it's on this heart already. So we can set those to texture transparent. The up face, we can just bring that across to these 3 pixels. There we go. You see it's now doing those 3. And the down face, we can bring across to those 2. There we go. We now have top and bottom for those. So these last 2 down here, these can be another 2 cubes. So we can duplicate this again, bring it down. The up face on this is no longer needed. And we can also squish it all the way down. So it's no pixels tool, we can bring it in. and then select the down face, and then we can click the auto UV button to resize it and then bring it across to there. We can do that one last time. There we go. That is now the shape itself without the border completely done. So I'm just going to save that, close it. We can go back to here. We don't need model.json. That's the old broken one. So delete that, and I'm going to rename this just back to model. There we go. Edit in Blockbench. Sometimes in Blockbench, it'll do this thing. There's just a bug. You can just go to textures, red, and just drag that to replace red.png, and then it will fix itself. So now that the basic shape is made, it's time to add the outline. We will need to expand our texture again to add room for the outline because it needs to go beneath it. So let's just expand this down, and I'm going to do the outline in black. So when doing outlines, there is one pixel which is absolutely required, and that is beneath our bottommost part of our texture. 2 pixels beneath, we need a single pixel here. This pixel is absolutely required when doing any border. Otherwise, the border can be anywhere you want down here, but I recommend doing it in the top left. So that is the main bit of the border, but now we need the border for this part of our texture. Place that. I'm going to make this black, and then I'm going to control click that to select it. I'm going to stroke it 1 pixel, and let's do another one. If I do 2 at once, the corners go weird, so let's do both. And then I'm going to shrink this as much as possible. So I think I can shrink this one down to 25% without it changing its shape, which is good. And I'm going to put this here. I can't put this here because then it would remove this clear pixel, which needs to be clear, so I'm going to put it there instead. And then I think that's all we need for this one. You might need a lot more different types of border shape in your shape, but since that's all we need, I'm then going to crop it back up to here and save that. Because I've resized the texture again, we of course need to use our texture fix script. So let's check the size. It's now 94 by 70. Go back to our shapes, heart, open model fixed in Blockbench. You can also open it by just dragging it in. And let's add our texture. We need to right click and refresh that because it hasn't refreshed it. There we go. Let's close both of these. Delete the old one and rename the fixed back to the basic one. There we go. Edit in Blockbench. So for our border to get started, let's add a new cube, and this cube needs to go around the whole thing. So if this is the shape of the thing, our border needs to be 2 pixels larger in each direction. And that is because the standard border size for this plugin is 2 pixels. Everything uses 2 pixels around the edge, so if you want to be consistent with every other thing in the plugin, make it 2 pixels wider. And that goes for this direction as well. So let's go 2 pixels wider and 2 pixels wider. We can assign a texture, red.png. Let's set the size of that to 1 by 1, and we can drag that down to be on our border pixel, and then copy paste it to each other face. So now our border, as you can see, our outline, is covering our entire shape. What we actually need to do is make this an inside out cube, and we can do that by setting all the sizes to negative. And you can't tell at the moment. If I draw on it, it'll be a bit clearer. Let's do a different color and add shading. There we go. So you see, it's actually an inside-out cube. Let's set that back to black and put this back around our model. When you're making this model yourself, when you're making your own shapes, you may find that the Java block item format is not letting you model as big as you want it to. That is because by default, there is a size limit. Since this isn't going into Minecraft, we can turn off the size limit. You can do that in settings. If you search size limit, you'll see the deactivate size limit option. So if you turn this off, it'll let you model it as big as you want. I recommend though turning that back on once you finish making your shape, so that if you are making Minecraft textures or Minecraft models, you don't make invalid ones by making them too big. So as you can see, the border is working, but it's too big. And that is because this bit down here and this bit down here, we don't actually want that to be border. That's what this part of the texture is for. So if I select the north face and I bring it over to here, we're going to resize it up to cover that whole area. It's upside down at the moment, so let's just flip it, and there we go. So you see that's looking a lot better, a lot more like the border. Let's copy that and put it onto the other face, onto the south face. Now the front and back are done. The up face, this is actually the down face because it's the one facing down, because it's inside out, it's at the top, it's slightly confusing. Let's paste that again. Let's size that up for the bottom one. Bring that down. For the left and right ones, doesn't matter which side you put it on because the shape is symmetrical. So there we go, that's our outline done on the main cube. So we need to add some other cubes now. Depending on how complicated your shape is, you may need multiple inside out cubes, but for this one I only need one. The rest of these are going to be regular cubes. So let's add another cube. This one is going to go in this top corner up here. Just like that. We're going to assign this to our red texture. We're going to bring the top face. We're going to copy that across and then resize it just so it's that 1 pixel. And let's assign that to all the faces. Now it's back like that. We don't need the north or south face on this one. We don't need the up face, and we don't need the east face. So now our cube is looking like this. When it's in the right spot, it hides perfectly the gap. It perfectly fills the gap. So let's duplicate this, bring it over to the other side, but on the other side, instead of having the west face, we want it on the east face. So let's copy that over and set the west face to transparent. That is the top bit done. So now it's time for the bottom bit. I can duplicate both of those cubes, bring them down, copy the down face to the up face and set the down face to transparent. And then we got those two. Do the same again. One last time. And that is our outline. Almost complete. Since our outline is now going beneath the bottom of the floor, I need to bring the whole model up 2 pixels. One final thing before we finish with the outline. If we look through the edges, you'll notice at some angles you can see the bottom faces of the other side. And then at the top you see the top faces of the other side. To fix that, let's add a new cube. We're going to make this 0 pixels wide, so we don't need a north, south, up or down face. We're going to make this as wide as we can so it fills the entire width. We're going to bring this into the shape. That's too wide. We only want it to be inside the shape itself. So just like that. And this exists to block the view. So when you look through the shape, you can't see the other side. So let's resize this up, and it only needs to go up to there because now you see it's blocking the view of the other side. We need 2 more of these. Let's duplicate that, bring that up to the top. Bring that across to the middle of this top bit, and then we need to make that a lot shorter. Only needs to be to there. Duplicate that one last time, bring that across to there, and you see they're now blocking the view of the other faces. The last thing we need to do is make them all black. So there's 3 of them. Let's highlight those 3. Set their texture to the red.png. Let's copy this face because that's the 1 pixel we need. Select those 3 cubes, and we need to select their east face and their west face to be black. And there we go. Now, as you can see, you can't see through it anymore because they're blocking the view. So that is the shape itself completely finished. It's time to set up the configuration files for the shape. So let's save that and we can close Blockbench now. If we go back to the heart folder, we need to make a new file and call it textures.json. For speed, I'm going to go to the dungeon skull shape and I'm going to copy this one and paste it in here. Let's open that in a text editor. And this defines all of the textures and overlays that this shape uses. So if I go to the textures folder, we see a red.png. Red.png is going to be the default colored texture. We also need a default flat texture. So let's copy paste this and rename it to flat. So if we see on our textures list here, the dungeon skull one has flat and dungeons. This one's going to have flat and red. If you want more textures, you just copy this bit and then you put them all down there like that. So let's make our flat texture. Let's edit this. I'm going to base this on the Minecraft 10 blank. So it's going to use the same colors. Where's its flat texture? There it is. So the front of it is white. So let's make the front of it white. The top of it is this color. So let's do the same there. And the bottom of it is this color. And then save that. That's our flat texture done. That was nice and simple. So with the textures, they require the author property. So this is saying who made it. So you'd put your name in here. An optional one is the name. So the name is the name of the texture. If the name is exactly the same as the ID, so for this one red, the name for it is going to be red. I don't need to put a name for it. But on this overlay, for example, highlights bottom, the name is highlights brackets bottom. So on this one, since the name is different, it needs a name. The textures also support variants. So if you want a variant, you do a comma, enter quotes, variants, you do a colon, and then the curly brackets, enter, and then in here you do a list of all the variants. This is the same structure as the textures block. So for example, if there was a variant, it would be like this. Instead of a red heart, it could be a yellow heart, for example. In fact, let's actually do that, because why not? So let's copy paste this and let's call it yellow. We need to edit that. So we have a yellow texture. So then in our texture, we call it yellow. Its name is going to be the same. We don't need a name. And the author on variant is only required if the variant author is different from the base author. So on this one, all I need to do is have those two brackets because I'm the author. I made both. Now for the overlays, at least one overlay is required. So let's make some overlays quickly. I'm going to make it the same as these two, then I don't need to change anything in here. Highlights bottom, highlights top. These are also two very easy ones to make. So let's copy our flat texture. Let's make a new folder called overlays. Go into here, paste. Let's rename this to highlights top, and let's edit that. For the overlay texture, we don't need the top, bottom, or the border, so let's delete those. And an easy way to make a highlights texture is if we copy paste our layer, invert it, hover it over our shape and drag it down 1 pixel. We can merge them together, then delete the black, and then we've got just the highlights at the top. So we can save that, and let's do the same for the bottom. Go back before we merged it, drag it up 2 pixels, merge it again, delete that, and then you see we've got the highlights at the bottom. Make sure we save this as highlights bottom instead of overwriting the top one. So as simple as that, we've now got our 2 overlay textures. So once this textures.json is finished, the last thing we need to do is add our shape into this shapes.json. So if you go back to the main folder, you'll see a shapes.json file. Let's open this. And in here, we need to add the shape data for our shape. So let's copy paste the sword one. The ID is going to be changed to heart. The author, I'm going to leave this the same, but you put your name there. Now the height, this is the height of our model. So let's open it in Blockbench. I can just open it from the recents. There we go. Doesn't matter, the texture isn't loaded. I just need to find out how tall this model is, including the border. So I can select the main cube because that's the whole thing. That is 32 pixels tall. We can ignore the minus, doesn't matter. It's 32 pixels tall. So 32. The texture width and height, we can see here, 94 by 70. So 94 by 70. The border, this is where the border is in the image. So if I open the image in an image editor, we need to figure out where this border texture starts. If I use the select tool, I can select down to it, and it says it's 62 pixels. So the border is at 62. The faces, this is the location of each face. The first number is the start, second number is the end. So it starts at 16 and ends at 44. That's the height I'm looking at. Starts at 16, ends at 44. So 16 and 44. The ends, this is the top and bottom face. So this is the start end, this is the bottom end. This one is the top and bottom of the top, and then the top and bottom of the bottom. I know the top starts at 0, that's nice and simple, and I know the bottom finishes at 16, because that's where the front face starts. I know the bottom face starts at 44, because that's where the front face finishes, and then the bottom face finishes at 60, which should just be 2 pixels less than where the border starts. So that is the heart JSON configuration completely finished. There are some other properties you can use, like thumbnail config, which changes how the thumbnail looks, but I'm going to leave those all alone. If you want to know more about those, they will be in the README file on the GitHub repository. So now this is completely done, I'm going to switch back to the other Windows profile, and then there I'll show you how to compile the shape. So now that I'm back on this one, let's get to compiling our font. You probably see here in GitHub Desktop, it's actually showing us the changes that have occurred. So you see here in the shapes.json, it's got our added stuff, and it's got all the files that we've added. So let's go to Minecraft title generator, the scripts folder, and then in here, we have compile. If you just run this, it's going to crash. What we need to do is install the required modules. What we need to do that is open this folder in terminal. It might be in the context menu here. If it isn't, you can go to the top bar up here and type cmd. Then we want to type npm install. If you have Node installed, this should just work. We hit enter and we just need to wait for it to finish processing. This will install all of the required modules that it needs to run. There will be some warnings, you can just ignore them, it does not matter. There we go, so that has finished installing. So now when I run the compile.bat file, it will start compiling all of the characters and fonts, all of the shapes, generating their thumbnails, making the model files into a loadable format that the plugin can use. There we go. So now if we go back to GitHub Desktop, we should see some new files have appeared. in here we should see, let's make this slightly wider, we got some new thumbnails for our shape. You can see here, thumbnails red, thumbnails none, that's for no overlay, highlights top and bottom thumbnail, the flat thumbnail. It has modified some other files, you can just ignore that. It says there's no content change, that's just the texture compression. If you don't want them showing up, you can just highlight them all. There you go, and just click discard. That gets rid of those. So the compressed.json, that will have changes, just ignore that, leave that, that's meant to be like that. Shapes.json, that's our added stuff. Textures.json, that's actually, we can get rid of those as well. Discard, discard. We only want our hard stuff. That one also, discard. And that one, discard. Now it's only our changes. So our heart model file, our overlay textures, our textures.json, our textures themselves, and then the thumbnails for the textures that we've made. And then the shapes.json file has been modified to add our new shape into it. It will look like a mess, you can just ignore that. So once all our changes have been made, we now need to test it. In order to test it, we need to commit this to our GitHub fork. So I'm going to put a summary of what I've done. So that's just heart shape, commit, push. This has now pushed it to GitHub. So if I open GitHub and I go to my repository, the fork I made, you'll see here, the last thing happened now, and it's one commit ahead. In order to test the shape, we need to get the code for the Blockbench plugin and modify one line in it to make it load from our repository instead of the official repository. So if we go to my GitHub Blockbench plugin repository, which is just Blockbench plugins, I will link this in the description. If you find the Minecraft title generator plugin and you want to download this JS file, you can click on it and then hit the download raw file button here. Make sure that you do not rename this file. In Blockbench, let's open Blockbench. We want to go to File, Plugins. In the install plugin, we want to either uninstall or disable it. I'm just going to uninstall it. We then want to drag and drop the JS file into Blockbench. And now that's installed it locally. The icon will be missing, that's fine. In the JS file, we want to open it with a text editor. And at the top here, let me make this bigger. Yeah, there we go. At the top here, you'll see this repo line. We want to change this to our repository. If we go to GitHub, our repository is here. It is this part of the URL. This is slightly confusing because my AutoCount's name is so similar. But there you see, it does change it to the new one. We save the file, go to Blockbench, make this full screen, help, developer, reload plugins. We can then go to Minecraft title, create new Minecraft title. Let's agree to that. Go to shapes, and we'll see our heart has appeared. We can now test it. So let's select that, select our texture. There we go. And we can click finish. So it works. Our heart shape works. I hate the default Blockbench highlight. I'm going to turn that off. Turn off, close. There we go. That's better. So our shape works. There we go. I'm going to tweak the texture of this because I'm not quite happy with the color at the bottom or the top, but it is now ready to be submitted. I'll change it to texture after I submit it so I can show you how you submit it. So let's go to GitHub. Our changes are made. We can click the contribute button here and open pull request. In here, we want to name the pull request. So this is what I will see when you submit it. So this is just heart shape, and then you can give it a description. And then you click on the create pull request. It's as simple as that. I will then come in and review it. If there are any changes that need making, I'll tell you what to do, what changes you need to make. There will be some checks that automatically process. So if this fails, that means that you made a mistake and you will need to go back and check. So you see it says all checks have passed. That means that the shapes.json file is valid. If it comes back saying it's failed, that means you've got invalid formatting in it and you need to go and fix that. Because this is all green and I'm done with my shape, I am finished. All you need to do now is wait until I accept it and merge it in. This has been how to make a shape and submit it for Minecraft title generator. I hope this helps. Another thing I want to add quickly, if you want to make a font instead of a shape, it's the exact same process as making a shape, but instead of making one model, you need to make a model for every single character. So it is a lot more work, but it is basically the exact same process. Once you get into the rhythm of it, it goes really quickly. So if you want to make a font, that's how you would do that. I hope that helps.